Okay, thank you very much. And before I start, I would like to welcome the startups in this maritime ecosystem. And we all know that shipping is responsible for around 90% of international trade, but 3% of greenhouse gas emissions. And for 3 minutes to show the importance of shipping, I would like to share, if I manage to do it, a short video from BIMCO.
At a time when the world stopped, ships kept moving. People still shopped, ships kept on proving. The volume of trade that's moved by sea, 90% of trade, actually. Crops that are weighed, cars that are sprayed, and it's easy to see the impact this makes. Fruit and vegetables, toys and collectibles, wheats and grains, the blood in the veins. Like to land, a farmer is, ships are to the sea. And if the world is the heart, ships are the arteries, which stock the pharmacies, move essential commodities. So there's a lot at stake across these seas. Without these routes, half the world would starve, while the other half would freeze. Without these bright-colored containers, the four walls in our house that contain us would be empty. The books we read, the animal feed, the oil we need, the global lives that we lead. No oil, no cars, no essential spare parts. The sea's version of stars, those flickering lights on the horizon, by moon and by sun, but the journey is never done. As a supertanker proves, the distance it moves is equivalent to 3 times around this earth a year. And we are served by over 61,000 ships. The things we buy, the things that shops sell, the 1.7 million seafarers, it's more than just engines that propel this industry. And it's easy to see that a lot is owed to the people that load. 6,000 ports worldwide, but it's not all plain sailing. It's rough seas and piracy warnings and the change that this inevitably causes. The sea covers 70% of our planet. So you can see why we need to plan it. A global community of knowledge and passion, from salt and sugar to the latest fashion. Our ships keep moving, products we love using. Ships make the world go. They help trade flow and let business grow.
So this is what I would like to show you. Let me close it now. And this was to show how important shipping is in the shipping. Without shipping, how different our life would be. And let me continue. So now I would like to talk to you about how important is to know about the policies and why it's not that boring as many people think, because usually new technologies and products are created by the market first, and then laws and regulations follow later to adapt to these innovations. However, in shipping decarbonization, the opposite seems to be happening recently. So strict regulations from the IMO and the EU are driving technological change, and the need to cut emissions, improve energy efficiency, and make shipping greener has pushed companies to develop new products and solutions specifically for the industry. So this shift is creating a new market where green technology and innovation are in high demand. And that's why I think startups, all companies, but also startups that act early and align with these changes will have a big advantage in the future shipping industry. So I hope I have convinced you. So now going to the environmental, the frame, I'm gonna talk about the international frame, so United Nations, then the EU frame, and then the digitalization, cybersecurity, and AI. But since I noticed that there are other people talking in more detail about emissions and then digitalization, I'll just do these slides very briefly. And if in the end you want to have a discussion, we can do that. Phoebe already spoke about some of the protocols. So the United Nations at the Earth Summit in 1992 adopted the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. This was the first step in addressing the climate change, followed by the Kyoto Protocol. And then in September 2015, the UN General Assembly adopted a global sustainable development framework, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future, having at its core the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Subsequently, we have the Paris Agreement, adopted by the UN Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which seeks to strengthen the response to climate change, paving a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emissions and climate resilient development. In order to reach the objective of the Paris Agreement and significantly reduce the risks and impacts of climate change, the global target is, in line with the report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to hold the increase of the global average temperature to well above 2 or even better 1.5% above pre-industrial levels. Also, every year in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UN climate change conferences are held with a view to assess progress combating climate change. So these are the COPs. I think that most of us are familiar with them. In 2021, the most recent ones in Glasgow, we had the Glasgow Climate Pact. In 2022, in Egypt, we had the SHIP framework. And then in Dubai, which was described as the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era, and then Baku in Azerbaijan, where they talked about indigenous people and how they should be involved and made progress on the carbon markets. So the IMO, what's the IMO? The IMO is the International Maritime Organization, is the international regulator, a UN specialized organization responsible for global standards with regards to safe, secure, environmentally sound, and efficient maritime transport. It actively supports and contributes to the SDGs, and especially all of the SDGs, but especially 7 on energy, 13 climate change, and 14, of course, life below the sea. Phoebe talked a little bit about the regulations, SOLAS. This is one of the most important regulations because it is linked to safety, and safety of life is also prevention of accidents. Actually, the first time this was signed, it was after the Titanic accident. Then is MARPOL, STCW, and then the ILO, the International Labour Organization. It has the Maritime Labour Convention. And some of the most important MARPOL conventions are the London Convention on the Prevention of Marine Pollution. It's the International Convention on Control on Harmful Anti-Fouling Systems. Maybe here, do you know what anti-fouling is? So let me tell you briefly. Anti-fouling is a special coating or paint to a ship's hull. Hull is the bottom part, to prevent marine organisms like algae or mussels from attaching to it. And why is it important? Because these organisms stick to the hull and they create drag resistance, which then slows down the ship, increases fuel consumption, raises operational costs, and leads to higher CO2 emissions because the engines put more power to be able for the ship to move. By using anti-fouling coatings, the ships move faster, they use less fuel, and this is good for the environment. But because before the AFS convention, the anti-fouling paints that they used were toxic. After the AFS, ships cannot use harmful anti-fouling paints, and they must ensure their coatings comply with safety regulations. So in that way, the AFS convention protects the marine ecosystem by preventing toxic substances entering into the water from the ships, ensures ships operate efficiently by keeping the hull smooth and clean, and supports sustainable shipping by reducing fuel use and emissions. Another regulation is ballast regulation. Maybe here as well I need to explain a little bit. Ballast in ships is in simple words, is the extra weight that helps a ship keep balanced and safe and stable in the water when sailing. Why is it used? Because when ship is not carrying cargo or has an uneven load, it can be unstable and then unsafe. So what do? They ballast, adds weight to lower the ship center of gravity, making it more balanced and safer to all. It helps control the ship's draft, so how deep it sits in the water, and improves handling in rough seas. Ballast water is ships put seawater into special tanks to add weight when they need it for stability. This is the most common method. And why do we care? What's the environmental concern? The environmental concern is that when ships take ballast water in one place and release it in another, they might transport invasive marine species which can harm local ecosystems. To prevent this, the Ballast Water Management Convention was created to ensure ships treat their ballast water before releasing it. So if you put water in, let's say, China, and you have a trip and come to the Med, you need first to treat your ballast water and not just release it in the Mediterranean Sea. Another one is the Hong Kong Convention, which talks about safe, environmentally sound recycling of ships after their life cycle. What does MARPOL? MARPOL is the most important regulation. It has 6 main rules called annexes that stop different types of pollution from ships. So stops oil spills and requires ships to have oil pollution prevention systems, controls how dangerous chemicals are transported at sea, prevents packaged dangerous goods from polluting the ocean, stops ships from dumping untreated sewage into the sea, bans throwing plastics and harmful waste into the ocean, and reduces emissions like sulfur and greenhouse gases from ships. MARPOL Annex 6 as well is an international regulation that limits air pollution. The most pollutants are SOx, sulfur oxides, NOx. SOx are the major cause for acid rain and respiratory problems. NOx, which contributes to smog and air pollution. PMs, these are small particles harmful to lungs and the environment. Volatile organic compounds and seaborne incineration, so it limits onboard waste burning to prevent toxic emissions. The IMO limits the sulfur limits in marine fuels. So outside, in general, the emissions outside the emissions controlled area, they must not exceed 0.50%, reduced from the previous 3.5%. And inside ECAs, emissions controlled areas, ships must have even cleaner fuels, so 0.10%. If they don't, they need to use scrubbers, which are like filters, let's say. The emission control areas are the Baltic Sea, North Sea, North American, Caribbean, and recently the Mediterranean Sea for SOx. And this year, in the latest MEPC, Marine Environmental Protection Committee, the Arctic, Canadian, and the Norwegian waters. 2 key points, but I think this will be discussed from the other people that will be talking. Just to say, 2 points is the Energy Efficiency Design Index, which says that all new ships must be built to be more fuel efficient. And the Ship Energy Efficiency Management Plan says that all existing ships must have a plan to reduce fuel UN emissions, which might include, to give you an example, better voyage planning, choosing the best routes and speeds according to weather routing, for example, or keeping the hull and propeller clean to reduce resistance, drag, or installing, for example, new energy-saving technology, better propellers, engine, or systems. I'm not going to say more to that. I think just to say that in 20 23, the IMO has updated the greenhouse gas strategy to make global shipping cleaner and more sustainable. This strategy sets clear targets and measures, and the ultimate goal is to have net zero emissions by 2050. There are some indicative checkpoints. And again, I will leave that. I will only tell you about one of the guidelines of the 2023 greenhouse gas strategy, also introduces indicative checkpoints. But apart from that, what it says, it takes into account the whole cycle, from production to use of marine fuels. How it works is from well to tank. So emissions from fuel production, processing, and transport to the ship, the upstream emissions, as we call them, and then from tank to wake, to propeller. Emissions from burning fuel in the ship's engine, calculating well to wake, the total emissions. Why do they do that? Because it ensures that low emission fuels are truly clean. So not just shifting emissions to another sector. And in that way, it also helps IMO to better do regulations for shipping. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm sure you will discuss it later. Energy Efficiency Design Index for new ships, they must be built more fuel efficient. EXI, Energy Efficiency Existing Ship Index for existing ships, they must upgrade to be more efficient. And CII Carbon Intensity Indicator for all ships, they must reduce fuel use every year to improve the rating. Otherwise, ports will not accept them. Some new solutions, better environmental solutions, is the LNG, is a transitional fuel, wind propulsion, batteries, fuel cell systems, ammonia, hydrogen, biofouling management, even nuclear power. There are discussions about nuclear powers. How much time do I have? Do I have 10 minutes?
Yeah, maybe 3-4 minutes should be okay.
3-4.
Maybe a bit
okay.
more, maybe because we were a little bit late to start. Maybe 5 minutes, you should be okay.
Okay. So let me tell you about every year, the IMO has the Maritime Environmental Protection Committees, and it makes various decisions. Phoebe has shown this. If we have time, I will go through it in detail because it's a very, very good summary. And then let's go to the EU legislation. The MRV regulation refers to monitoring, reporting, and verification of CO2 emissions from large ships using EU ports. And since 2024, MRV is more aligned with the IMO data collection system for better global monitoring, because IMO had one system, the EU had a different system, and what happened is that on the vessels, the captain had to do 2 separate sets of books for the same thing. So there is some alignment, which is a very good thing. European Green Deal, I'm not going to talk about it. The climate law, Fit for 55 package, the EU ETS, just to say that the Fit for 55 package is to reduce emission by 55 by 2030 and achieve net zero by 2050. The goal is therefore to make shipping cleaner by including it in the EU carbon market, so EU ETS, requiring greener fuels, FuelEU Maritime and ETD, Energy Taxation Directive, improving port infrastructure, alternative fuel infrastructure regulation, and increasing renewable energy use. This is the RED 3. Since 2024, shipping is included in the EU ETS. What does this mean? In one sentence, it means that ships must buy carbon allowances for their emissions. So it covers 50% of emissions for trips between EU and non-EU countries and 100% of emissions within the EU. Digitalization, I'm not going to talk about it because the only thing that maybe I could say it's digitalization is important because it improves efficiency, so faster cargo handling, better voyage planning, safety, real-time monitoring prevents from breakthroughs and accidents, supports sustainability because digital tools help reduce fuel consumption and emissions, simplify trade, no bureaucracy. And the EU digital markets aims to have a common boost trade and have a common registry, let's say. And to close, I think that safe, secure, energy efficient, affordable, reliable, low carbon, environmentally friendly, climate resilient, and rule-based maritime transport systems can definitely contribute and do contribute to achieving an economically efficient, socially equitable, and environmentally sound development and world. For those, I saw it last minute that there are some startups that deal with cyber security. I'm not gonna talk about it, just to give you the two directives in case you need them for something. There is a roadmap for the implementation of NIS and the compliance. IMO has talked about Code of Maritime Autonomous Surface Ships, MAS, and there are new regulations on Cyber Resilience Act, EU Machinery Regulation and Radio Equipment Directive, and an AI Act. This is a new regulation as well. Thank you very much.